I've been thinking a lot about masculinity lately. I think I always have been in some ways. I guess we all have. Recently, I went back home for Christmas, back to the house I grew up in small little Buffalo, New York, and my mother told me that I needed to clean out the last vestiges of my stuff that I had left in her home, or else she would throw it out. You know, that mom thing of, you're an adult with a home now, deal with it. So, I'm almost 30 now, so I guess it is probably about time. Jesus, I'm 30. So, I went to the basement's darkest corner and found 4 boxes. After finishing college and moving to Los Angeles, I had put everything that I had wanted to say from that childhood and couldn't take with me in these 4 boxes. So as a result, everything that was already in these boxes was chosen by me, things that I had wanted to ensure stuck around for later. And so when I opened them, I got lost in memory. I found a lot of toys and weird stuff like this guy. It's a whole Fisher-Price castle that I played with as a kid, and it's freaking great. Like, look, it has a little trapdoor and a little dungeon that you can torture people in. It's got a little cave. It's got a little cave over here. Like, this thing was the absolute best, and I adored the crap out of it as a kid. But as this very much shows, these things in these boxes weren't just objects, but connections to my past. Threads and tethers to moments of emotion, and to the life that I had lived. Tokens along the path that I had walked that marked the way for me. You can see where I am now as a person and draw a direct line back to these objects, tracing them like paths on a map. I had things like my old Animorph books, or Bionicles, or my Mystic Knights of Tir na Nog action figures, and all of these things are still the shit. Obviously, you can see how they connect to me now. They're incredibly dorky and nerdy, so that tracks. Yet, I think even deeper, they're all items about transformation and change. They all feature masks and armor or stories of attempts to be strong. But in reality, if you break all these things down, they're about transformation into a new self. I didn't really know how to express that or articulate it, but something about these things spoke to me as a kid. As a young child struggling with gender and many other things, magic and fantasy felt like they were the only way I could ever be the real me. Yet, not all magical worlds contained in those boxes still hold that prominence in my heart today. Some things were hard to see in those boxes, like merchandise from a specific Wizarding franchise that I had to let go of. Such is the pain of growing older and seeing context change, and also seeing the darkness that can exist in the world. Yet, of course, there were plenty of other wonderful things that I still really love. Plenty of Star Trek things, for example. That was there with me from the beginning and has never left me. That belief, the promise of a brighter future for everyone, regardless of who they are. And yet all of these pop culture items and pain and journeys and hopes shaped me and who I am today in some form. Hence why I kept them in those boxes the last time that I was at my mom's house. And I looked at every single one of those things with a swell of emotion and could easily link them with an aspect of myself. My transness, my optimism, my traumas, my dorkiness. Yet also within these boxes, I found 2 more items. And they're on the wall behind me. Posters of these 2 men. Rorschach from Watchmen and Heath Ledger's Joker from The Dark Knight. And yet, when I sat there this past Christmas looking at these 2 posters that I discovered, I tried to remember why I had kept them. What had they meant to me back then? So much so that I decided to keep them in this box of all these important tokens of my life. Because frankly, I couldn't recall why. I couldn't identify the feeling that I had associated with them. Yet, while I may not have remembered the feeling, I did remember their prominence. For my entire high school life, these were 2 of only 3 prominent posters on the wall in my room at my father's house. They were the images that I looked at every night as I went to bed. The photos of 2 men who felt lost in the world and had no real identity, but who put on an ever-shifting mask and backstory to express their anger and hate at the world. 2 nihilistic men who had no more real identity beyond the motivation to continue moving simply on the fumes of a sense of directionless anger and pain.
And all the whores and politicians will look up and shout, "Save us." And I'll whisper, "No."
But underneath that anger and pain, they were nothing. Empty. Kind of like what I felt as I looked at these posters a few months ago. It's hard to escape thinking about masculinity in our society today. Every conversation seems to orbit around it as an ever-present topic, as if it's a gravity well at the center of our endless cultural discourse that we must move elliptically around, sometimes finding ourselves far away from it, and sometimes much closer, but always, always in its gravitational pull. We recognize masculinity as this force in all of our lives and its intrinsic appeal and sometimes repulsion to all of us. We hear it so much in our discussions, things like Andrew Tate's drawing of young men into his manosphere world, or we hear things like gender-critical TERFs yelling about the male socialization of trans people and the dangerous men, aka trans women, they see entering into their spaces. We also hear feminists discussing patriarchy and how it harms them. So many conversations relate to the idea of manhood and masculinity, always in acquiescence to or repulsion of. And within that, there has been a recent discourse in YouTube spaces that I frequent as a leftist surrounding what the left can give to men. After the arrest of Andrew Tate, the discourse became, well, Tate, as horrible as he was offering young men seeking validation as men an answer. Whereas the left often talks about manhood in terms of being something awful, vitriolic, toxic. And how the left isn't doing enough for men in terms of marketing itself in a way that appeals to those who get pulled into right-wing ideology or fascistic or authoritarian or just plain sexist manosphere energies that takes their angers in darker directions. And I've seen many men in my space make stunning, excellent videos pushing back against that very idea. Men like Fantastic Mr. Fox, or That Dang Dad, or FD Signifier, Foreign Man in a Foreign Land, or Turb have all made great, fantastic analyses of masculinity. Find ways to move that masculine center, that gravitational pull, to something new around things like caring and protection. Yet, within these discussions, I don't often see trans women like myself or other trans femme folks brought in to these conversations. And it's understandable on the surface, right? You'd think as a trans woman I'd be running as far away from masculinity as a concept as possible. I am, after all, the soy boy feminized man that the left turns you into if you start listening to socialism. And admittedly, there was a point in my life right after I came out as trans that I did try to run as far away from the idea of manhood as possible. I would wear over-the-top dresses and heavy makeup because I thought the only way to be me was to distance myself from the man that I knew I wasn't. But since then, since initially coming out over the years and now, I guess, decades, I found myself drawn back to thinking about masculinity more and more and what it means for my life today. And as I look at these discourses that my fellow creators, primarily men, are having, I find myself often relating to these discussions, and sometimes even find myself watching a 2-hour video by FD Signifier and saying, yeah, I understand a lot of what you're talking about. Because the things that he's discussing were things that I struggled with too. So I want to talk to you today about my journey with manhood, both within it and outside of it, both in appeal to it and repulsion of it, and how in a weird way, I've come back to incorporating it as a part of myself, but in an aspect you wouldn't expect. And as I tell this story, I want you to forget, at least initially, that this is the story of a trans woman, because I know some of you out there will instantly dismiss this video if you haven't already when hearing this story in relationship to masculinity. After all, that is where you see this ending, a trans woman saying masculinity bad and horrible and toxic and awful and we need to destroy it, and thereby you can just toss away this video because that's not something you agree with. But that's not where I'm going with this. Because I think as a trans woman, in my perspective on this, I have an interesting journey through all of this. And it's not just a journey that I've had, and I've included interviews with fellow trans femme creators throughout this video to help discuss it. So let's jump into a journey about masculinity and how it relates to trans femme folks. We speak in our society today about things like male and female socialization. You hear this phrase mostly today in places like gender-critical TERF rhetoric. This line of thought in those spaces can be found in one of the foundational texts for the modern TERF movement, Janice Raymond's 1970 book, The Transsexual Empire.
We know that we are women who are born with female chromosomes and anatomy, and that whether or not we are socialized to be so-called normal women, patriarchy has treated and will treat us like women. Transsexuals have not had this same history. No man can have the history of being born and located in this culture as a woman. He can have a history of wishing to be a woman and of acting like a woman, but this gender experience is that of a transsexual, not of a woman. Surgery may confer the artifacts of outward and inward female organs, but it cannot confer the history of being born a woman in this society.
The argument that Raymond is making here is that there is some innate experience, often rooted in oppression, mistreatment, and their body, that all assigned female at birth people have. Even trans men and non-binary folks who are also assigned female at birth. And that trans women and non-binary people who are assigned male at birth, like myself, cannot access this experience of female socialization. And this idea has evolved further into today with the idea that trans women showcase innate manly traits that stem from our male socialization. You hear this rhetoric pop up a lot, that when a trans woman yells or gets angry or is vocal or takes up a significant amount of space in a discussion or, physically, that this is all evidence of our male socialization.
It's the male socialization. Hard to undo by just changing pronouns. He's a man.
It's funny because you're exhibiting a common pattern of male socialization, mansplaining. You're poorly trying to pitch my own beliefs back at me, assuming you know better than I do.
Yet while TERFs and anti-trans bigots often wield this concept to say that trans women are actually just men, it's not just TERFs and anti-trans bigots who use it. We even sometimes hear this idea of male socialization even within trans-affirming and even trans-specific spaces. The idea is that a trans woman like myself are more likely to speak loudly or take up more physical space because of this. Or that trans men cannot perpetuate patriarchy and sexism because they've experienced female socialization or feel like they should take up less space. But this concept, as an idea, presses a male and female experience into singular identities and versions of socialization. There's kind of a baked-in assumption that there's this universal male and female experience that is still innate in what genitals we are born with, or at least in what we're taught specifically based on those genitals that we're born with in each and every culture and group in society. I've heard trans men describe female socialization as some sort of singular experience that every AFAB person goes through, and the same with trans women like myself, as if assigned male at birth people have the same exact understanding of the expectations of gender that we are supposed to live up to. As if the socialization we received based on our gender at birth or gender assigned at birth determines who we are later in life. The reason I speak so loudly or take up space as a trans woman comes down to the fact that, I was taught these things as a kid, and this determines who I'm going to be for the rest of my life. But is this concept true, though? For me, I think in many ways, I always was me. I was kind of a little nerdy kid, soft and band geek, yearning for connection with others. I was the child who got inspired by dorky things, who couldn't pronounce words well, who couldn't tie my shoes, ties them once, and then slips them on every time after that until they fall apart and never has to tie my shoes again. I'm the one who loves Animorph books and Bionicles and Star Trek, someone who hopes for a better future, someone who smiles a lot and cries a lot. The tokens of my childhood that I showed you earlier prove that the kid that I was always that person, only discovering themselves through the mementos that I was given to express or start to give myself words to understand myself. Some of these traits aligned with the man that I was told that I was supposed to be, and some didn't. In fact, a lot didn't match up with that default avatar of a man. But I was aware of that man. Growing up as someone seen as a boy, at a very young age, you start to get the sense of expectations for the man you're supposed to become. Everything around you tells you to exist a certain way. You see images of this perfect man, this perfect exemplar of who you're supposed to be, everywhere.
Never apologize, mister. It's a sign of weakness.
We all know this man. He's the man who appears as the lead in every single big blockbuster movie. It's the man that you see in the front of every magazine cover at the grocery store. And it's the man you see when you start a video game off and turn on a character creator. That blank, naked, white, muscular dude who stares back at you as the default. You don't have to turn the dials or the sliders or mess with anything. That same endless video game man face that you see so many characters have. I saw who on TV filled specific roles of the breadwinner, the gutter cleaner, the tough guy, all men. TV shows, media, the way your mother tells you to man up, these things are expected of you. And as a kid, you learn all of these things. I saw how if I hurt myself, I was told to suck it up. I was constantly asked to play sports, to get involved in baseball, football, something athletic, because I was a boy. I was never good at any of them or cared about any of them, nor showed any real interest in them, and yet everyone around me was telling me that this is what I was supposed to do or what I had to join to be my full self. I was to play this role. I was supposed to become that blank avatar that stares back at you, sliders unmoved. We often talk about this default man in terms of how every other identity is measured up to it. How women, trans people, queer people, disabled people, chronically ill folks, black folks, indigenous folks, Asian folks, brown folks, and others are also always measured against the default, which is a man, and how that leaves them all being wanting. How they can never actually be a white, cisgender, able-bodied dude because they never were given a chance to. How our society places people into roles and places this version of a man at the top, and how all other identities are made to feel secondary or even worse, seen as deviations from the norm, and it leads them to be seen as less than right from their birth instantaneously, based on their very bodies, not who they actually are. But those seen as young white boys at a young age based upon our bodies as well, we are told that we actually could become that guy. That avatar then strips us of our ability to have our own identity. I never would be, never could be that man, and neither could many other men. But I knew I was supposed to be. And so I tried to live up to him. I tried to play him. Tried to press myself into that form. He didn't have an identity. He didn't have any form of self-expression. He was a role, a function to play out the story of a man in our society. But he's just that, a part to play. And this goes even further when we think about that in terms of white men specifically.
When I talk to white people about racism, their responses are so predictable, I sometimes feel as though we are all reciting lines from a shared script. And on some level, we are, because we are actors in a shared culture. A significant aspect of the white script derives from our seeing ourselves as both objective and unique. To understand white fragility, we have to begin to understand why we cannot fully be either. We must understand the forces of socialization. Individualism is a storyline that creates, communicates, reproduces, and reinforces the concept that each of us is a unique individual, and that our group memberships, such as race, class, or gender, are irrelevant to our opportunities. Individualism claims that there are no intrinsic barriers to individual success, and that failure is not a consequence of social structures, but comes from individual character. According to the ideology of individualism, race is irrelevant. Regardless of our protestations that social groups don't matter and that we see everyone as equal, we know that to be a man, as defined by the dominant culture, is a different experience from being a woman. We know that to be viewed as old is different from being viewed as young. Rich is different from poor. Able-bodied, different from having a disability. Gay, different from heterosexual, and so on. These groups matter, but they don't matter naturally, as we are often taught to believe. Rather, we are taught that they matter, and the social meaning ascribed to these groups creates a difference in lived experience. We are taught these social meanings in myriad ways by a range of people and through a variety of mediums. This training continues after childhood and throughout our lives. Much of it is nonverbal and is achieved through watching and comparing ourselves to others. We come to understand who we are by understanding who we are not. But because of our society's emphasis on individuality, many of us are unskilled at reflecting on our group memberships. To understand race relations today, we must push against our condition and grapple with how and why racial group memberships matter. The inability to acknowledge these forces inevitably leads to the resistance and defensiveness of white fragility. We must reflect on the whole of our identities, and our racial group identity in particular. For white people, this means first struggling with what it means to be white.
I have a lot of empathy for white folks because it's a really weird position to be in, to see a whole bunch of people around you identified as like a race or a culture, and then have you just be white. What I see it manifest as is like white people having to augment themselves with other cultures' things. You know, white people who want to feel like, you know, they're doing black culture or something like that. What I think I am seeing is people trying to fill that void and not realizing that, one, that void was created, and two, there's your own history that you can trace to fill that void.
Yeah.
You know, like you go to Poland, there's an identifiable culture in Poland. You go to Germany, it's the same thing.
You made me just think of like, you're very good at making me self-analyze.
Good.
But you just made me think of like a moment where in my childhood, I got really into Indigenous American culture and wanting to have like trace my history to that at one point and realizing that I couldn't. And then there was another kid in my school who I remember feeling jealousy towards because he stated like he did have some indigenous heritage and he would like explore that, and I just remember feeling a lot of jealousy. I didn't say this to him, but like I wanted that, and I didn't have that. Like it just like that idea of like, oh, I just don't have anything to draw upon and don't have any culture to pull from, you know. And you like search for it. Like my family, my grandmother is on one side is Russian, and on the other side we're Welsh, and you know, you like try to figure out what that is, but there's like such a distance to it. Like it feels like, oh, that's what we did back in when our family lived in Russia or our family lived in Wales. But it's like not something you have now. It's gone now.
So incredibly on purpose too. Because you see, like, even just the way that you're talking about, I'm hearing like some sense of like pseudo resentment when whichever ancestor was that immigrated here, they absolutely dealt with that. And their options, you see it a lot with like Russians do it for sure. There's a big Russian population here in Philly. Russians do it, and Jews do this a lot. I've noticed where they like anglicize their names. Yeah, it's like this sort of push toward assimilation. You hear it all the time, and that's what's happening essentially. And that's what happened to you. It's what happened to every other, you know, descendant of like white person who's a descendant of like some immigrant somewhere here. I mean, you know, we're all the descendants of immigrants. Some of you are the descendants of settlers, but that's a different conversation. You come here and you're expected to wipe yourself clean of all of that dirty shit that you would have brought otherwise.
Yeah.
And then what the U.S. has done, and I would argue Britain does this too, but they take the things that they like and then they call them American, like pierogies.
Mm-hmm.
It's a good example that like pops into mind, right? Like that's a Polish fucking food.
Yep.
That's a white American thing. Like no, that's from Poland.
We aren't told to be ourselves, and so we attempt to become that automaton, that robot. We keep trying to be that man, yet it takes everything from us. Our ability to be anything else, because we're always end up just trying to live up to this guy. And we end up lost, meaningless, without identity. We have no identity, no sense of self. Our personhood has, in this attempt to live up to this man, been annihilated. And we're told to end up being totally alone, because we've now put on this mask of this man and told never to allow anyone else to see underneath it. So the mask becomes us. We become a role and a function.
Yeah, I was being like kind of targeted at school for my I guess my failure to be masculine enough. And so I kind of I tried, I gave it a shot. I did eventually cut my hair short around 13 or so. I started working out and I started my voice started getting deeper, and I didn't think these things bothered me at the time,
Yeah.
It wasn't painful so much as it was not me alienating.
Yet we yearn so deeply for someone to see us, to find us under the mask. Please see us. We don't care who it is. We just want connection. Yet we're not allowed to connect with other men. We have to be isolated from them in our own autonomous unit. Be a man, do it by yourself, be in competition with other men. We can't have deep emotional ties with other guys. We can't touch each other or be close. And I'm not talking about sexually, but just physical and emotional closeness. To feel like someone is connected with us in some meaningful way.
One of my memories around age 10 was I'd gone to a summer camp, a scouting camp for a week, and I had this stuffed rabbit with me that was my mom's, and I guess the boys from some other group in the province, they found it in my sleeping bag and threw it around and stuff and took it to Lost and Found. Yeah. And with the intention that I would have to then claim it in front of everyone.
Embarrass yourself as yeah.
Exactly.
We aren't allowed to see other men as capable of connection. We are told instead to be a function in this capitalistic game. We are told to go into the workforce or join the military. And I felt that exact impulse. I felt like I was terrible at being a man, so I joined the Boy Scouts. I thought that it would help me and give me a masculine structure. And I was really good at it. I got to be an Eagle Scout. I literally won the award for being the best boy. I fulfilled the role. But it still wasn't me. But there was something that I did find beyond that role of masculinity I was supposed to fulfill at Boy Scouts. I worked at a Scout summer camp every summer for 10 years. 8 weeks in the woods spent with a bunch of boys my age, all teaching other boys that were just slightly younger than us, but not by much. And every summer was the same arc. Our staff would start somewhat distant from each other, being able to only find connection being rude and crude and gross, expressing ourselves in ways that we were told was just boys being boys. Yet, at one point during every summer, someone would say something like, "My back hurts." And I would respond, "Hey, I can give you a back rub." And so I did. And that's how it always began. By the end of the summer, we'd be hugging each other, giving each other shoulder massages, and being more physically close than we had been before, or really with anyone in our lives. And this closeness wasn't judged. It wasn't seen as weird. It would have been at the start of the summer, but by the end, it was just us being intimate and close. Yet those were not the most intimate moments. You see, there's a magic in the woods that we found. All of us lived in our own nice tents provided by the camp, and we'd have our own campsite just for the staff with a fire pit. And every night, we'd often gather round it and wind down our day. And we share moments under the nighttime sky with a campfire as the embers glowed in front of us. We play guitar, tell funny stories, some gross and weird, but more often than not, telling stories of our lives, or, as the summer went on, sharing our fears, our hopes, our vulnerabilities. And in those moments, the night sky seemed brighter than ever before. Most of us were city kids, used to light pollution that made us think that the nighttime sky was just a black, empty void, punctuated by tiny little lights. Yet here in the woods, away from the lights of society, that night sky was not black, punctuated by dots of white, a duality, a binary of color that felt all expansive, but had gradient, color, vibrancy. Above us, the endless expansiveness of stars twinkled as you watched the glowing, floating embers of the fire fly up and fade into that sky, as if becoming stars themselves. As if the light of our stories somehow had an ethereal quality. They got swept up into the heavens. That because we had now spoken them aloud to each other, these parts of ourselves that we had never shared before suddenly made us part of a larger universe in a way none of us had ever knew was possible before. We had become a part of the colorful tapestry of the galaxy above us that many of us had never known existed until we had escaped the worlds that we had grown up in. And it made us connected to something bigger than just our single selves, but to each other in a way that we never had. This connection wasn't inherently romantic or sexual, though I'm sure some boys at the camp explored those aspects too, but for most of us, it was just connection with other human beings who happened to be seen as boys. It took time to get there, but by being away from everything and just being with each other, we could be close in a way we were told not to be back home. But at the end of 8 weeks, we'd go home, back to the world, back to society, and that connection would go away. We'd be isolated again. Back to the light and pollution of the world that we had so briefly been allowed to escape. And when we returned to the real world, it seemed like those 8 weeks were a dream, something that never really had happened. And yet we still yearned for that connection that now we knew was missing, the connection that we had found in the woods, but didn't have in our everyday.
I enlisted in the Army well over a decade ago. And going through training in the Army, although I think it's changing now, but essentially it's just trauma. They just traumatize you with other people. So then you form a bond with other people. And then, you deploy and that gets even worse. Because then, that's just fucking literally everyone involved. There's something about, I think, being isolated and also being asked to do things together that breeds some semblance of like emotional vulnerability among like men or people that are masculine or whatever, because in training, I got closer to men than I'd ever gotten like prior to that like, time in my life, because these are people that I'm learning to depend on, that I'm learning are supposed to support me, and that I'm obligated to support in return. And after having established that trust with this many people, we were doing shit with one another that, like, externally would be like, you would look at it and you'd be like, that's just a bunch of gay men sitting together. Like, they're all gay.
Yeah, no, same with my Boy Scout experience. Yeah. It's interesting too, because like seeing like the parallel and also the difference. Like, one parallel is like Boy Scouts is sort of like it's almost like pre-military training for kids. And but I think like part of the difference is like the expectation there is like, okay, we're gonna go build baskets and like cut wood and like do like quote unquote manly things, but it's like more of like constructive and like kind of healthy directions that they sort of like put that towards, even though it's sort of like training for that military aspect. Whereas in the military, it's sort of like they use that trauma bonding and that closeness to then like manipulate people to do violence against others.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
Don't join the military, kids. It's really fucking bad for you and everyone else.
Yet we were not allowed to be as close with each other, or at least other men around us, as we were with the men that we were at the camp, because society wouldn't allow us to be. We wouldn't be seen as manly if we had ended up being that emotionally and physically close with each other. But we'd still want it, even though we knew that we shouldn't. So we sought out the only people that we were told, as men, to seek out to fulfill this void of connection. Those who were viewed as women. Women are supposed to be men's receptacles. And yes, I use that word very specifically. It's not just the sexual connotations that I'm evoking, but the emotional ones too. And it's not that it has to be a specific woman, but any woman can be this receptacle for our desires and yearning to fill this void of connection that we all want. Comic artist Kate Benton wrote about her time working in Canada's oil sands in her autobiographical graphic novel, Ducks. While working at the oil sands, Katie depicts how she was constantly surrounded by working-class men who worked for these oil companies because the oil companies primarily only hired men. And then these men would live in work camps on the work site together, not actually getting to exist out in the real world. This was very similar to my experience being a boy in the Boy Scouts. But here there was a slight difference, because these men were told to be strong, tough, oil workers working for the company, to be cogs in a machine, and to be strong men doing it. And Katie spoke about how so many boys around her at the oil company followed her around, trying to be with her. They sexualized her, ogled her body, and she was made consciously aware that it wasn't because of who she was. All it was that caused them to follow her around was that she was the only woman there.
All you need here is to be a woman. You stick it out, and that's all it takes, and someone thinks they like you. But that doesn't make me feel good. That makes me feel like I'm not even a person. But how can I say that? And then, I don't know. I just feel insane every time something happens because this never happened before in my normal life. Like, they don't even know me. And there's no way they'd feel or do the same thing if we weren't here, and it's so awkward. I just don't know. I don't know how to handle these guys.
Those seen as men are told to see women as objects to be used, not entirely people. And any woman can be interchangeable with the next one. They just have to be a woman. They are just meant to be reflections of our own selves, these receptacles to dump our feelings into. And women are also to be physical connection too, even if they don't want it. Kate Benton also speaks about the sexual violence that men did to her, how they just expected it of her without care for her consent. And even after those moments, even after they happened, the men themselves wouldn't even recognize what they had done to her as violating her consent. Because that's the role women are supposed to play. And that's all they saw her as. They saw her as a willing participant. And these are roles that both those seen as men and women learn equally. We learn the role of a man and the role of a woman together at the same time, even though we're enacting different ones ourselves. For men, it's be strong, tough, and dominant. Control. Control yourself, control your body, control your emotions, control the situations, control the conversation, control others. Control. That's the role of men. And yet in reality, we can't control everything. And in our capitalistic world today, where we're told to be functions for these companies, you don't get to control your fate or your ability to find a job, for example. Sometimes we just have to take the job that we can get, if we can get one at all.
And so many men subsume their identities into the company, the job that they're doing. But it's an identity that is ultimately empty, because it's not actually what they want, it's just what the company wants. And yet, because they don't really have any other way to figure out how to identify themselves, they start to identify with this capitalist culture, the consumer culture, because it's all they have to go into, and it's what they're told to go into. They lose themselves into the function that they're seeing they're supposed to play.
Oftentimes, too, you're not able to pay your bills. You don't have enough money to be able to provide for those around you, be able to provide for your family, your home, and that's what men are supposed to do. Right? And yet, many times they can't. So many men feel emasculated.
I can't really begrudge people for being masculine so much as the systems that, like, impose that on them, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Of course, it's everyone's job to work through this shit. But, like, masculinity as a force, I would say, like, primarily as it exists now, is to protect the nuclear family, which I am not a big fan of, and to protect, like, the current class system we have going on.
The man would be the breadwinner, woman's at home, and, like, class sort of, like, reinforces, like, that, like, men having to, like, constantly earn money, and women sort of being cut off from that too. But then also sort of, like, a man now needs to provide for an entire family by himself. And thereby, like, it makes him more reliant on a capitalist system.
Most definitely. And I think it also, the position that men have, you know, for the past, I don't know, 60 years, been expected to hold is one that can, like, plant a seed for, like, such a dangerous resentment. I know, you know, the whole thing of, like, boomer guys hating their wives, hating these people they've spent their entire lives with, who've, like, built a life with them.
You know, we live in a capitalist system that forces men to have to, like, see themselves as, like, needing to provide for all these other people, and makes them more reliant on the capitalist system, because now they have to, like, spend their money on not only themselves but on a wife and kids, who those people are generally cut off from access to capital, or, like, less, hopefully less so today, but still to a larger degree so. And then that sort of builds the seed of resentment of men, not towards the system, because they don't see the system. They see the people around them who are sucking away their money and their bank accounts, and you know, they just see the individuals and not the system that's causing that hurts all of us.
Like, becoming aware of our class society also for men means, like, having to acknowledge the ways that they do have power. And a lot of working class men don't feel like they have any real power, you know? So I guess there's, like, a reluctance there.
The other thing that the graphic novel Ducks touches upon is how corporations and colonialism constantly tries to control the land and push indigenous people out from it, moving indigenous people off their lands in a genocide and try to control their resources.
What is it going to be? What is it going to look like? And what our kids are going to live on, you know? It'll never be the same. Our lives will never be the same. It's ruined completely. Everything is ruined. Our lives are ruined. Our lands are ruined. Our water, the air, everything. The almighty dollar comes first. You know, that's pretty sad. You can't drink oil to live. You know, you can't eat money to live. I would like to let them know the way we're being treated here. we're not treated like humans. We're nothing because the money comes first. Our lives don't mean anything to them.
And then erases the history of that land, so it only becomes the hegemonic history of the culture that white men are told to press themselves into, shoving all of the history down into that black hole that sucks and consumes and erases everything but the idea of a singular solitary man at its center.
Especially those seen as white men, trying to fill the function of a man. And as a result, they get resentful. We get angry. We're doing all the right things. We're trying to be this thing that strips us of everything, and yet we still aren't doing it good enough. We don't see our purpose being fulfilled. We can't be who we're supposed to be, and we aren't even given the tools to express who we actually are. So we're just angry. Angry at everything. As a kid, I was angry a lot. I once got suspended for punching through a door in school. And the reason that I punched through the door was because I was told to walk around the cafeteria and not walk through it because they were cleaning it. It's stupid and dumb, but I was just angry that day. I didn't really know why, and being told what to do, being told that I had to walk somewhere else just pissed me off. So I punched the door in front of my cafeteria lady. And still to this day, I still kind of feel pain in my hand because of it. Yet it doesn't just stop at self-harm or harm at inanimate objects. I once, and I will tell you this first, the cat was absolutely okay, but I once threw a cat in anger. Again, no real reason. I don't even remember what the argument was. I was just pissed off. So I picked up the nearest thing near me. Didn't see it as a living being. Just picked up my cat and threw it across the room. That cat was scared of me for the rest of its life, which was very long and very happy, to be clear. But I almost deeply harmed another living being because of how angry I was. And I also hurt myself because of how angry I was, permanently. I felt like an empty shell, a person wearing a mask, and as a result, angry at the world, feeling like it was pointless and meaningless, and wishing I could just shove that violence onto others and other things around me. I remembered all of this as I stared at those posters that I found in the box. And I remembered why these characters resonated with me. Yet, why had my Bionicles and Animorphs rung so instantaneously in my soul as soon as I saw them? Why was I excited to find them even before I opened the box, remembering that they would be in there? And yet why had I forgotten these posters, which had been a prominent part of my life and even, as I just stated, represented a huge part of my emotional worldview at that time? Why did I not remember them or even putting them in the box? And why did it take so long staring at them to even remember and articulate what they had meant to me? I think it's because these touchstones of my childhood connected with who I actually was. Whereas these posters behind me were about what I was made to feel. Remember when I talked about socialization, the idea of some intrinsic universal male and female experiences? To me, I think that's bullshit. I think that all of us are individual people underneath what society teaches us to have to be. And I feel like I'm lucky. I got to see and understand a little bit who I was underneath that mask I was told to put on. I got to find characters like these, or characters like Jadzia Dax in Star Trek Deep Space Nine, who were fictional people, but who cut across identity boundaries. And through them, I was able to see who I actually was and a path to get there. I saw myself in them, and thus began to have the language I needed to be able to express myself in a way. And as I started to go online and learn words like trans and gender and things like that, I began to be able to articulate it. I began to see someone who I could put myself into, a different role that I could put into besides that default avatar that I knew I never could be. And I walked that path and found me. I shed the role that I was given and found who I actually was because I got to see myself.
I didn't really have the language, honestly, until 5 or 6 years ago. Prior to that, it was just like something, you know. And I think had I had the language back then to label it, my life would have been much different. But I always liked things that are like feminine, so to speak, right? Like my arms, they're covered in flowers.
Love it.
On both sides.
I love it.
And what that was for me, trying to like smuggle in things under the guise of like masculine things, right? Like cars, very like like the obsession with cars, very masculine thing, right? So I'm playing Need for Speed Underground, and you know I have these cars, so I'm doing a masculine activity, right? Like customizing cars, like that was a huge thing back when I was a teenager, you know, customizing your car, blah blah blah. On top of that, you can pick like different art, like different decals and stickers and stuff to put on your car. And I would put roses on everything. Because that was a way for me to kind of try and grab at what I wanted to grab at, but didn't have like the breathing room to be allowed to do that.
Trans women aren't seen as being part of this function of this capitalist world. We don't fit into very obvious buckets to sell to. Back then, we could only be imagined in the mainstream as a metaphor, as aliens, fantasy Power Rangers, or whatever Bionicles are. And as a result, it allowed me to think of myself free from needing to think of myself as a function for a capitalist world, about finding a job that I was supposed to be perfectly fit within. I knew it would suck to exist within that system, but I also realized that that system would never want me in it to begin with. It would just accommodate me. I realized that that system would never function for me because it wasn't built to include me. While that is oppressive and sucks and is dehumanizing, especially when we live in a society that makes us all feel like we have to be part of that system, it kind of freed me of the anger that I had internalized. It let me take the anger that I felt in here and put it out into realizing that the system itself was the problem. The function that I've been trying to live up to was never going to accommodate who I actually ever was. And so I realized, oh, yeah, fuck that system. Even more so, I started to resonate with this idea of escaping the matrix of our capitalist world because of the community that I found online. I grew up in an era where the internet was much less solidified and codified and put into our more corporate systems. An era where I could find other trans people.
Yet many young men don't have that chance. Instead, they gravitate towards cultures online that they're told to inhabit to fill that void of identity that they're feeling. One big one is gamer culture. Gaming TM culture is often centered around men and was especially more so when I was growing up. But this was not just a natural occurrence, but one literally created by consumerist culture. When trying to enter the video game market, Nintendo created Rob the Robot to sell its NES consoles with in the 1980s, so that they could market the system as a toy instead of a console. But toys in the 80s were marketed in incredibly gendered ways, and so gaming consoles with the NES were marketed exclusively towards boys. And as such, young boys were given an entire medium of art to feel was centered solely around them in its infancy.
Nintendo Entertainment System. Now you're playing with power.
But as this artistic medium began to grow, especially in online gaming spaces, it was very much built upon this insular culture for manhood and masculinity to thrive. One which excluded all others and thus allowed this angry, unaccountable spaces to grow. But this culture was taken even more advantage of, because boys were marketed to as the central audience for gaming and thus were used as tools of corporations. You see this not only in the fact that many games were sold to young men, but you also see examples in how corporations used young men to defend themselves in their practices. That physical and sexual abuse and crunch cultures at these corporations is okay as long as the gamer's favorite game gets out on time. Or you see it in things like the competitive console wars mentality that grew up around Xbox versus PlayStation versus Nintendo in the 1990s and 2000s that still exists today. It creates these combative, capitalistic mindsets all built around defending a corporate culture version of gaming. Young men in gaming spaces become tools of corporate interest, all motivated by selling them an identity that they can press onto the empty void of identity that has been stripped from them. Yet this is where my and many young men's paths diverge, because I was lucky, because many of the places that I found online were through communities like Star Trek, communities that were often very queer accepting, if not actively queer themselves. In many ways, both Star Trek as a nerddom and finding a queer and trans community online as well gave me that sense of culture, community, identity, and personhood that I had never had before, that I should have had before. And I was able to find these spaces because of who I was inherently. For spaces like mine, Star Trek was indeed also a consumerist product sold by a Hollywood company, but I engaged with that intellectual property with fan fiction or fan art. Generative communities that are very much about moving beyond the control of corporations that own the IP and creating our own versions and love and identifications with it, not just the versions that were sold. This is why you see things like reading Kirk and Spock as gay, because it allows us to put ourselves into a space that we never were allowed to see ourselves in because we love something like Star Trek so much. It's a place where women and queer folks and people of color thrive because we were not who Star Trek was marketed to in the first place, despite being a big part of its audience because it did resonate with us.
I got to escape the matrix of capitalist function. I think a lot of you realize that I'm evoking the movie The Matrix, a movie made by, at the time, 2 closeted trans women. But a movie that many now recognize as reflecting an overt trans experience, something that these 2 creators were trying to express. I recommend my friend Aranock's excellent video about how The Matrix as a movie is intrinsically transgender for more specifics, but you can see it very obviously in just the story of the film. It's a movie about a boy, or someone seen as a boy, fulfilling a role in society, who learns that he doesn't perfectly fit that role, and he does so through the internet, through computers. Computers allow him to connect with others and see representations of a world and other people that he's never been able to envision before. And he uses pills that at the time happened to kind of look like what an estrogen pill looked like to be able to escape and express his true self, who is much more powerful than anyone actually ever thought, but through which was never actually made to be part of this world around him. He even has an agent of the state, of the world that the system represents, who wants him to work for a function for it, constantly dead-naming him.
Goodbye, Mr. Anderson. My name is Neo.
It's all very transgender, and it's an experience that I very clearly resonate with. The idea of escaping the Matrix is one that feels intrinsically transgender.
All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
But it is not only transgender, because it's a film that made millions, not just because of its incredible action set pieces, but because so many others connected with what it was saying. A lot of young white men responded to The Matrix very viscerally and emotionally. That's because, unlike many trans people, they haven't escaped the Matrix. But they feel like they want to. They desperately want to. They are so angry and just want out, want to escape that anger and express it. And for a moment, the Matrix gives them a way to articulate that and feel catharsis within that. Yet, many cisgender white men aren't who I am. They're not trans. They are different than me. They don't get to express themselves the same way as me. They don't have characters like Jadzia Dax to be able to connect to and understand that they're trans, because they're not. The only role that society even closely reflects them in our pop culture and media is only and always that blank, empty avatar. So even when they see works of media that seem to give them that catharsis and emotional feeling that they want, they still aren't given someone really to go into, to feel like they are fully a part of. They may feel like Neo, but they aren't really Neo. And that's because they aren't really told to escape the Matrix, but become the winners of the Matrix, to be the best part of the Matrix. That blank every avatar is supposed to be the one like Agent Smith, the one who gets to control others. That's what they're supposed to aspire to be, and that's who they're only able ever to articulate being. And so their anger grows because they want to escape the Matrix, they feel it emotionally, yet they can't, they don't know how. And so much so that they use that language all the time. And yet, those communities online who use that language are not ones that are off the grid, so to speak, but are simply places that have found ways to commodify the concept and emotional feeling and catharsis of the red pill for the Matrix itself. What do I mean by this? This seems very heady and confusing. Well, let's take Andrew Tate. Because Andrew Tate himself often uses the language of the Matrix to sell his appeal to young men.
We are living inside of the Matrix, and I am Morpheus. And when I say we are living inside the Matrix, I'm not stating that with irony or as a joke, or I don't want you to use it as an example of how the world could be. We are genuinely, actually living inside of the Matrix. The Matrix is real. The very basic premise of the Matrix is that humans are nothing more than batteries for the machines. And in the world we currently live in, every single one of you is being reduced in real time to nothing more than a QR code. You're losing autonomy over your own bloodstream. You're losing the ability to walk freely, to go where you want, to make own personal choices regarding your medical decisions. You're losing all of that. That's all being replaced because you are a cog in a machine, and that machine is soulless. The reason that the humans are fighting the machines inside of the Matrix is because machines have no soul. All they care about is efficiency, slavery. And this is what's happening to you. They don't care if a few people die from it. They're not interested if a few die, if most don't die. You're all expendable.
And this seems to resonate with a lot of ideas that I've been expressing, that there are people trying to control you, trying to make you be a certain way, and that he defines that as the Matrix. Yet, it's even more interesting to see how he articulates what escaping the Matrix means. Because for him, escaping the Matrix is power, anger, violence, control.
That has any kind of warrior spirit inside of you should be very much like me, struggling to sleep at night. I'm actually genuinely losing sleep over this stuff because the world is falling apart in real time. And for my short human existence, every single time something went wrong in my life, I knew the answer. But the answer to this one's pretty difficult. You need to become obsessed with wealth. I can't explain how many times during this episode of human history I have managed to skirt the rules purely because I have huge sums of money. It doesn't matter if I take a private plane when there's no flights. It doesn't matter if I contact my friend who has a business to get me the correct visa to get into a country I'm banned from. It doesn't matter, right? I can give you 100 examples, many of which I won't see on YouTube. The point is, when you have a lot of money, you then get a lot of influence over others. And with influence over others, you can begin to skirt some of the rules.
This is the language that young men are already being given. And so when they hear it, they think, oh yeah, that's what I'm supposed to want. That's what I'm supposed to do. He sells the tough guy ideal as a way to escape the Matrix and tells them that their path to walk to get out of that is to become that avatar, the best version of that avatar that they're supposed to be the perfect controller, be the yerk inside someone else's head, to be all-encompassing. He takes their anger and desire to escape the Matrix, but then pushes it further into that role of control. Of controlling women, of others' bodies, gaining a company, and be in competition with all the men around you. And these young men believe that Tate is offering them a way out of the Matrix because that's the only path that they feel is real. It's the only one that they are given the language to understand, to be that blank man avatar. Yet, they're not escaping the Matrix. They're part of it, because he isn't offering them a path to themselves, he's offering them a path to his course.
Stop. You cannot give up. You're in the most fantastic place on the planet for making money, Hustlers University, and the only person who can ruin that is you. Most of you are happy to be losers part-time. You want to escape. That's why you joined. You don't want to be a loser anymore. But then that new video game comes out. I'll just play the video game. I'll just be a loser for 2 more weeks. Then I'll get back to trying to escape the Matrix. It doesn't work that way because you jump in and out of complacency from I'm happy to be a loser and do loser things to I can't be a loser anymore. And when you jump in and out, you never get momentum. You cannot quit. You cannot give up. You need that momentum to break free. Every single second you're not in Hustlers University, there are things happening, conversations happening that you're not watching, information. That could be the one little piece of information you need to break out. It could be that one little sentence that changes everything. You're in Hustlers University and you're going to make money, but it ain't easy. It ain't going to be given to you on a plate. You're going to have to work. You're going to have to work. You're going to have to work.
You're going to have to work.
Tate sells this Angerman persona all to make millions and sell his product. He isn't escaping the Matrix, he's just trying to win the game of the Matrix.
Ferengi workers don't want to stop the exploitation. We want to find a way to become the exploiters.
But the game is only built to let some win it for a time. And everyone else loses, but feels that they are in competition to constantly get to that top dog position.
Competition with the entire world. Everyone wants to escape. You cannot be lazy.
They have to beat each other. They have to dehumanize and push each other down. They have to be in competition with other men. Don't feel connection with them.
And I remember this because once I was in the gang, then you're constantly being tested.
Mm-hmm.
Those spaces heavily police themselves for masculinity. They heavily police themselves for homophobia, and transphobia, etc., etc. It was almost like any day at any time you could end up in like a physical fight with another gang member, and you were expected to fight. You did not opt out because that made you look weak. There's like another, like back to the danger, specifically when it comes to like being black. Like if you're not dangerous, then you are potentially a target, right? I remember I was with my brother, and my mother, my older brother, and my mom. My older brother was telling a story about this guy he was getting ready to pay for like a cheesesteak or something like that at like a corner store. And he was getting ready to hand over $5, and somebody came in and snatched the $5 out of his hand and then walked off, and he didn't do anything. And me and my brother were going back and forth about how ridiculous it was that he didn't do nothing. And my mom looks at us and goes, "What do you mean? It's only $5. I'm like, "Mom, like if you don't fight over that $5, if you don't fight right then in that moment, then everyone else knows that they can take money from you."
Mm.
So you're pushed into danger. You have to be dangerous. Otherwise, you become a target.
And yet, while at the same time these men are starting to feel in competition with the men around them, they are also told to control those who are seen as their lessers, those who they're supposed to view as just objects for their success, those who they're supposed to control. Idea that is constantly reinforced through the utilization of masculine mindsets. A mindset that for many trans women is easier for us to see once we have a chance to escape from it.
And so I went the extended Thanksgiving weekend without my T blockers, which meant testosterone got into my system again for the first time in several years. And I really hated how I felt. And I don't mean like I felt physically ill. I mean, I felt like my brain was hijacked by the person I used to be. The way of viewing the world in a more, how can I use this? And the amount of unbidden sexual thoughts in my head, if I could have scooped the pleasure center of my brain out during that stretch of time, I would have. It felt like somebody who I hadn't been for a long time suddenly was in my head again and had access to me. And it just really felt gross. Now, I do want to say that this is my sense and my sense of disgust with my own masculinity. And then filtering that very reductive view of the world through what society thinks men are supposed to be. Yeah, probably was a factor, but I think that was just societal influence funneling a thought process and structure that I just don't ever want to.
Yeah.
I don't ever want to be who I was again.
And this viewing of control, of viewing those who aren't like you as men as only the functions that they can serve for you that our society fosters in men, is most obviously seen in how men are taught to view the women around them, as Andrew Tate himself so often expresses.
The only way you're supposed to feel connection, as Tate puts it, is to treat women as objects, to be tossed aside, controlled, and used, to be sought as trophies and rewards for being winners of the Matrix. But not as whole people. Be a little trophy to put on your shelf.
I believe that as a man, I should pay for the first date. I believe I should open the car door. I believe I should protect for her, provide for her. I believe if she's my woman, she should be able to come to me with her problems and I should fix them. That makes me a sexist and a horrible person. Fine.
It doesn't.
You agree with the baseline. Everyone agrees with the foundations of what I say, but when I build on top of it, they try and pretend it's sexist. By extension, if I have responsibility over her, then I must have a degree of authority. For the same reason, if I have responsibility over, and everyone's going to lose their mind, it's an example, it's only an analogy. If I have responsibility over a child, I have to have some authority. You cannot be responsible for something that doesn't listen to you. You can't be responsible for a dog if it doesn't obey you, or a child if it doesn't obey you, or a woman doesn't obey you.
This super sexist path.
Cool. Let's take a beautiful sports car. It doesn't matter. A house.
Yeah,
land,
didn't help.
whatever. It doesn't matter. Whatever I'm responsible for,
object.
I have to have a degree of authority over.
This sense of controlling women because you are owed them as a strong, manly man who is making a lot of money for capitalist culture was showcased very recently with right-wing talk show host Steven Crowder. Steven Crowder is someone incredibly bought into this idea of constantly making more money is what you need to do as a man. Even going so far as to say that $50 million that were offered to him by the Daily Wire was a, quote, slave contract. Which is an absolutely disgusting way to frame making $50 million freaking dollars, but showcases how much to his mind making more and more money is tied to autonomy and masculinity.
This is where, in going through this, and I needed to take some time because, look, I've always tried to be a happy warrior, and I want to go back to that. I haven't been happy for a while. To be really, I haven't been happy for a while because when you know what goes on behind these scenes, and you see how many people are complicit, it creates an air of hopelessness.
Yet it's because of this exact mentality of Steven Crowder being so ingrained in this culture of capitalism and masculinity that it was such a big deal when he announced recently that he was divorcing his wife, Hillary Crowder.
Proverbial boot on my neck for going on years now. Since 2021, I've been living through what has increasingly been a horrendous divorce. Now, let me say on the outset, to be clear, there is no infidelity, any kind of physical abuse at all on either side. And no, this was not my choice. My then wife decided that she didn't want to be married anymore.
Steven Crowder denied when he announced their divorce that there was any emotional or physical abuse in their relationship that led to the divorce, to which Hillary Crowder's family released this video in response to, and warning for abusive behavior displayed by Steven Crowder in this video.
You've made me.
What do you need me to pick up? I'll get it. I'll be back when I'm back.
No, that doesn't work either. You'll be back when you're back. That doesn't work either. Do you understand the difference between my life being set to the second and you going, I'll be back when I'm back?
Steven?
You're making it work. You do that. The only way out of this is discipline and respect. It's the only way out of it, or we're at an impasse.
We are at an impasse.
Good. Because you can't have any discipline or respect.
Steven.
There you go. You throw your hand, you give up so easily.
I don't give up, Steven.
Hillary,
Steven?
you give up so easily. I just said the only way out of this is discipline and respect. You said, then we're at an impasse.
Steven, no, we are at an impasse, okay? I love you, but Steven, your abuse is sick. Your abuse
Watch it.
is sick.
Watch it. Fucking watch it.
I'm gonna let go. I'll get what you need me to get. And I need some space. We need to just talk and baby for a little bit, okay? I love you. I love you very much.
I don't love you. That's the big problem. I've never received love from you. And the fact is, when I go, look, I need you to do A, B, C, and D, you just be disciplined about it, you go, no. But I love you more than life itself. Okay. Put on some gloves. No. But I love you more than life itself. That's not fair. That's not fair, and it's disingenuous.
Throughout that video, Steven continually gaslights Hillary, refusing to allow her access to things like her car, denying her access to movement and ability to get away from him and her ability to have autonomy in her decisions, and demanding that she do, quote, wifely things like pick up food for him, all while she was 8 months pregnant with their twins, to the point where she ends up crying, trying to plead with him that she loves him, trying to make him back down by trying to emotionally placate him, while he emotionally manipulates her by saying that he doesn't love her because she won't acquiesce to his entire desires for him, while he completely ignores her own. This is clearly emotionally abusive, yet if you look in many of the comments on the video from folks in Crowder's audience, they often ask, where is the abuse? They don't see what Crowder's doing here as abuse because they don't see Hillary as a full person. They see Stephen's actions as a natural extension of how men are supposed to treat women, as objects who are there to exist solely in service of their quote-unquote man, and any anger that Stephen expresses is justified at her for not performing her quote wifely duties, as he puts it. It showcases how much the idea of control over women is tied into one's sense of masculinity that both Crowder and his audience try to demonstrate and believe in, and that Crowder himself is required to constantly project to his audience. And we can see this need to constantly project this masculinity to his audience around him to showcase that he is a dominant man in how Crowder had to announce his divorce. Because when Crowder announced his divorce, he had to go on his show to affirm to his audience that it was most certainly not his choice to divorce his wife, but because he lives in a one-party divorce state, which legally allows people to get a divorce even if only one party seeks it, his wife was able to get the divorce without him consenting to it.
Now, let me say on the outset, to be clear, there is no infidelity, any kind of physical abuse at all on either side. And no, this was not my choice. My then wife decided that she didn't want to be married anymore. And in the state of Texas, that is completely permitted. It's been the most heartbreaking experience of my life, what I consider to be my deepest personal failure. And just so you know, my opinions on parenting and families have not changed. I've always believed that children need a mom and a dad, that divorce is horrible, and I still believe that children need a mom and a dad and that divorce is horrible. But in today's legal system, my beliefs don't matter.
The reason Crowder had to constantly state this over and over again to his audience and make it expressly clear to them that it was not his choice to get a divorce is because, in the mind of his heavily masculine-centered and patriarchal audience and world, they see it as an embarrassment that he cannot control his wife's entire body and life completely. It is seen as an attack on his masculinity and sense of strength, his ability to be a dominating man in a capitalist world, that he cannot control entirely the choices and autonomy of the women in his life. Crowder and many other right-wing men like him are attacking things like one-party divorce laws and even no-fault divorce laws, which are laws that mean one does not have to require proof of physical or mental cruelty, adultery, or some other marriage breakdown in order to get a divorce, something that is harder for women to be able to do for numerous reasons, from police not believing women when they report abuse more often, to women not feeling safe to even report in the first place.
But in today's legal system, my beliefs don't matter. In Texas, divorce is permitted when one party wants it, period.
Ultimately, this whole event with Steven Crowder and Hillary showcases how much Steven, who is so involved in this culture of masculinity, invests so much of his masculine identity with his ability to control women, and how that pushes out not only into his personal relationships, but into the politics of controlling that this culture reinforces them, and why this culture of masculinity pushes many men into right-wing politics, which itself is about all controlling and reinforcing a hierarchy and status quo with men at the top in quote-unquote traditional roles. Yet all of these events with Crowder also underscore the anxiety that constantly underpins all of these men's motivations. The fear of women embarrassing them, the fear of not constantly having control, the childish motivations and attitudes expressed when controlling others and controlling women specifically that Crowder displays, not even being able to go to the store for himself. It's all stemming out of that fear that they aren't enough, that they aren't men unless they're constantly displaying this projected manhood for others in competition with others to showcase that, yes, they're the more dominant manly men. It's all horrible and disgusting, yet it's all just stemming from a childlike sense of anxiety and a lack of feeling of self-worth.
One study found that a man who feels personally deprived in his personal life is also more likely to endorse sexist attitudes, because they think that they are owed women. And because they aren't getting women, because they feel deprived, they feel that they need to react angrily at the people not giving them what they are owed. Yet this idea of control leads to the dehumanization of others, as I've said, and anger extends beyond just women, but when we talk about race. I remember a moment in elementary school when a new Hispanic kid named Jose joined our class. He barely spoke any English and was actually from Mexico and had just come from there. And my class at the time was predominantly white. All but 2 kids, Jose included, were white. So Jose and his clearly distinct culture were strange. And to me, and many kids in my grade, Jose became a novelty. An object, not a person. And as I spoke about with Bellamy in the clips that you've seen throughout this video, I personally longed to be closer to a culture as I didn't feel like I had one of my own. I felt like I was that blank avatar, and to see someone who had such a distinct cultural identity, to me, felt fascinating. To me and one other white kid at the time who was also angry a lot as I was, we were so isolated, and so desired to be friends with Jose, but in a way that dehumanized him, saw him as an object. In fact, quite literally, we argued in front of him over who got to be his friend. As if we were in competition with each other, as if only one of us could ever be his friend. Yet beyond that, we objectified him without even giving him the ability to express a desire if he even wanted to be friends with us in the first place. He didn't even understand our language. He only spoke limited amounts of English at the time. There was no question in our minds whether he would want to be a friend. We got to determine that for him. It was gross, and thankfully, I've had a chance to apologize to Jose years later. But at the time, I was just a kid who thought that way and was told to think that way. Being honest, I was nervous to write that story into this video. And I kind of sat and tried to analyze why I was nervous to do so. And I realized that it came from two places within me. From guilt and fear. Guilt is easier to understand. It was a shameful thing to do about how I dehumanized and objectified Jose. But I also know that my guilt would keep me from being open about this being a thing that happened. And I need to admit that it did happen, that I did it, to be able to not only talk about it, but to understand why I did that. And to hopefully be able to share it with others in a way that's constructive. And also, to be able to take responsibility for what I did. To be able to apologize to someone. To get over my guilt, because my guilt isn't helpful to anybody, least of all myself.
Never apologize, mister. It's a sign of weakness.
The fear, though, that's more interesting. What am I afraid of? Of being seen as a racist? There is a fear that admitting that I did things that will make others see me as a racist. But that's the interesting thing, though. The fear comes from not having been racist. That was in the guilt part. The fear comes from being seen as a racist. I did this decades ago, but I fear being essentialized because our culture tells us that once we are something, we are that thing forever. And if we are branded that as such in the eyes of others, that's all we should ever be seen as. So a lot of people are afraid to be open about it because we don't want to be commodified as the racist person. But because we don't want to be seen that way, we don't want to be essentialized that way, commodified that way, we deny it, hide it, push it away, when we need to take ownership of it. I need to be open about it because that's the only way that I can grow and that others can hopefully learn and grow too. And if people hate me or don't forgive me or don't like me because of what I did all those years ago, well, that's absolutely their right. They have every right to feel that way. I hope that I've shown that I've grown since I was 12 years old, but I understand if that's not something that you're okay with, even all these years later. That's fine. I don't have any right to tell you how to feel about me. And yet, our society tells us that we should be able to control what others feel about us. In our Western society, when people call out, when people do things that perpetuate sexism, racism, etc., people's inclination naturally is to run from our fear and our guilt.
Given the dominant conceptualization of racism as individual acts of cruelty, it follows that only terrible people who consciously don't like people of color can enact racism. Though this conceptualization is misinformed, it is not benign. In fact, it functions beautifully to make it nearly impossible to engage in the necessary dialogue and self-reflection that can lead to change. Outrage at the suggestion of racism is often followed by righteous indignation about the manner in which the feedback was given.
We saw an example of this quite clearly recently when 3 lawmakers were protesting against gun violence in the Tennessee House of Representatives. Yet the Republican-controlled House only expelled the 2 black lawmakers who were protesting, not the white woman, despite her doing the same thing as the other 2. It was quite clearly an action born out of racism, of wishing to punish and control the bodies of 2 black men who were seen as more aggressive than the white woman was, because black men are often seen at odds and in competition with white manhood, due to everything that we've been talking about. White men, as I've talked about, view other men, and specifically white men around them, as in competition with them on an individual level, but many white men will also view the white men around them as part of their in-group when they are framed against black men, who then they view as the out-group, framing race as a way to create a line of competition and us versus them mentality, painting black men as lessers and thereby dehumanizing them in that us versus them mindset. Yet, when these Republican lawmakers were called out on their racism, tapes that were leaked behind the scenes of their conversations revealed that these lawmakers were more upset by being called racist, as they did not wish to be essentialized individually as a racist person, than for actually committing racist actions, showcased by them continuing the meeting to talk about the process of how they chose to target the 2 black men for punishment by expelling them from the House.
I think now, more than ever, everyone should recognize that Democrats are not our friends. I listened for the last 3 days to Democrats, Sam McKenzie, Chisholm, Parkinson, trash us as racists. I've never had anybody call me a racist. And for the last 3 days, all I have heard from them is how this is the most racist place. One of these white supremacists. Good Lord, we have to realize they are not our friends. They can smile, man, that doesn't mean I can't be polite to them, but they are not our friends. They destroy the republic and the foundation of who we are, or we preserve it. That is the reality where we are right now. And if these last 3 days have not proven that, you need to find a new job. There's never been a more important time for us to be unified. And Jody, I'm just going to say it here because you signed the letter. You straight up came to me and said you were 100% where I was. And you went on the House floor and you did the opposite. Man, you hung us out to dry. And I like you personally. This is not personal. And if Brian Terry was here, I'd say the same thing to him. This would have been bad anyway, but good God, we brought the racism into it because you didn't stay with us. I need to know why you flipped your vote at the last minute. You didn't let them know beforehand.
The questions start coming up about the resolution. I know what she did. I know what she did broke the rules. And I know that she deserves to be expelled. We got to do it right. And that wasn't right.
Yet these Republican lawmakers didn't view their actions as racist because racism has been so ingrained in many of our systems in the United States that it makes itself invisible to those men who treat it as normal, as just part of the way our world works. And this systemic structure then also allows these men to remove themselves from culpability for their actions by saying, well, it was just the system. We were adhering to the rules of the system. We were just respecting the importance of the office, rather than taking ownership of their actions.
I'm concerned about the House floor following the process and procedures that are laid out that you should follow and not having a protest, as it was described over here, on the House floor.
This is often how men, and specifically white men, or those viewed as white men, handle having committed racism, by removing their personal culpability and placing it onto a system that makes these racist actions seem natural and invisible and makes it the responsibility of a group of people rather than one individual person, making the individual person feel less culpable in those choices. Thus, this continually serves to perpetuate the system that places white men at the top, and make it difficult, if not impossible, to have conversations about how that system continually enacts its will.
We don't want to be seen as sexist or racist, regardless of whether we were actually sexist or racist. We can't because we know we're good people, and we want others to know that we're good people too. We don't want to wrestle with what we did or what we might have perpetuated because it would mean self-analyzing. And our world tells us not to self-analyze, to constantly put on the mask that we're supposed to wear, to never take a moment. We must always be strong, appear strong, project perfection. And so for a lot of men who are told to always be strong instead of self-analyzing, people seen as men take it as a personal attack. They're calling us a racist or a sexist or transphobe. How dare they? Don't they see that we're actually a good person? We don't want to be essentialized that way. We don't want to be commodified that way. Screaming, yelling. But for men, those who are seen as men, we get angry. We scream and yell because that's the tools we're told to use. And sometimes our anger lashes out in violent ways, punching, kicking, throwing. That's what our anger tells us to do to those who are making us feel angry.
How much can you know about yourself if you've never been in a fight?
Often, that violence can make the other person shut up. By yelling and screaming, by using violence, we've scared them or shut them up, hurt them so they can't talk back. And when they can't talk back, the criticism goes away because it's not being said anymore. And suddenly you feel good because now you don't have to be in a space with people who are just asking to be considered. They're gone now, and our cognitive dissonance can dissipate. But you haven't addressed anything. You just lashed out and hurt others and failed to hold and see your own culpability. That's what a lot of men are told to do. Often class can play a significant role in this too. Capitalism takes advantage of white men who are told that they should control everything but can control nothing, and tries to tell them that they should be using the anger that has been instilled in them. Going back to Tate, this is exactly what he's told others to do, to lash out, to be angry, to shut other people up. He's not offering them, though, that natural red pill. He's offering them a placebo. No, he's selling them a placebo to make money for profit. And he's not the only one. So many groups and people who tries to sell an authentic masculinity are really just selling a product. But it gets darker, because it can be more than just trying to make money. Because as I said, while many men still feel angry that they can't live up to this version of manhood they're supposed to be, they can't always win that capitalist game, they're left to squander and flail about.
All of this creates a sense of loneliness in men, a terrible weight and isolation. And within that loneliness, they begin to think about the others around them. They look out into the world and think about those who they are not next to, how they desperately wish that they could be near someone who is not like them, something new, something different. But because they are not exposed to new ideas, new worldviews, new perspectives, they begin to think that those other than them must think exactly like them, because it's the only mindset that they've been taught to think through. It is not that they don't understand other perspectives, it's that they quite literally don't have the tools to be able to think of them, to imagine them. From all the pollution, they can only see the black and white dots in the skies, the binaries, the us versus them, not the actual gradient of colors that exist. And because our world teaches men to be in competition, to be on top, to control others, they think that the others around them that are unlike them also wish to do the same to men. That instead of trying to create a world that is equal for everyone, like most people who are fighting the status quo want, they begin to think that everyone who is not like them wants to control men, the way men are taught to control others. And so men not only fear, they lash out and try to control even more.
And where does that anger end up going? It can be used for violence.
And you want to know the secret? To borrow a phrase from a friend of mine, our secret sauce here, it's these young white men. That's what we call the secret ingredient. America and the world has forgotten about them, but not us. You know, they say about America, they say, diversity is our strength. You know?
That indulgence requires taking away the rights and customs of so many people. If it is false, then for the good of society, and especially for the good of the poor people who have fallen prey to this confusion, transgenderism must be eradicated from public life entirely. The whole preposterous ideology at every level.
Signifies drag queens dancing for toddlers, males invading women's bathrooms. It signifies castration drugs given to children. It signifies the destruction of the nuclear family. When government officials send that thing up the flagpole or paint its ridiculous colors in the street, that is what they're promoting. It's what they're advertising. It is the cause they want us to salute. Not only should we refuse to salute it, but we should treat it with disdain. We should treat it as a hate symbol, because that's what it is. They fly the flag, that flag, because they hate you and your values and what you believe and everything you stand for. And so we should respond in kind to this symbol. In other words, we should give the pride flag all of the respect that the left shows the American flag.
Must be familiar with the red pill community.
I'm vaguely familiar with them.
Their whole thinking is that feminism is oppressing men.
No, their whole thinking is that radical social justice warriors are polarizing society. And that's exactly what's happening.
There are those in power who stoke anger in dissociating young men, young white men, and tell them that the problem isn't the system, isn't the matrix, but it's the fault of others. Of trans people, of women, of black people, of Jewish folks. They control the matrix. They're stealing what you rightfully deserve.
And they say that they're taking away your culture, American culture, which is the only culture and identity that many young white men feel because they've deliberately been cut off from their own cultures and heritages and backgrounds, as Bellamy spoke about earlier.
Proud Boy's not racist.
They need to find a sense of their identity because you're just slavery was wrong. Slavery was wrong. Okay, but we're living in a time period where whites are becoming minorities. Are you a communist? Are you a communist?
No. Okay. That's a strange question.
Well, you're calling me a nationalist and a Nazi.
Yeah, I have a problem with nationalism.
Why? What's wrong with nationalism? Pride for your country? That's wrong.
Nationalism leads to problems. If everybody is out there saying their kind is superior to everybody else's
No one's saying
kind.
superior. It's a love for your kind.
Oh, you are saying superior. I asked you a minute ago, and you said whites were special.
The politics of sexual anxiety is particularly effective when traditional male role models, such as that of family provider, are under threat by economic forces. Since fascist politics has, at its basis, the traditional patriarchal family, it is characteristically accompanied by panic about deviations from it. Transgender individuals and homosexuals are used to heighten anxiety and panic about the threat to traditional male gender roles. Fascist politics distorts male anxiety, heightened by economic anxiety, into fear that one's family is under existential threat from those who reject its structures and traditions.
And so, men who are now angry at the world enact violence, hate, and anger towards these groups because they feel they have nothing else left and are told by those that they trust, those who are selling them a version of manhood that they've been told since birth is what they should have, that these are the people that they should get angry at. Instead of being in community with those around them, they're viewed as antagonists. And so men will dehumanize and lash out because that's all they're told to do.
These horrific ghouls set angry, isolated young men upon minorities to prop up their own power and authoritarianism. It's why you saw people like Steve Bannon use movements like Gamergate, which is a movement of people within male-centered gaming culture lashing out at women in gaming spaces like games journalism. Steve Bannon used Gamergate and generated ones after it to prop up his Breitbart magazine and things like Donald Trump's presidential gambit. And yes, I did say Gamergate, I had to in this context. Apologies. This hate and anger is why you see hate groups begin to form. And it's also why you see many hate groups that form based around the idea of minorities controlling their world also create rhetorics of things like a white ethno-state or talk about ancient European culture as some mystical force.
Heimbach, let me ask it this way. If you could snap your fingers and live in a white ethno-state without any other groups experiencing oppression as a result of the creation of that ethno-state, is that something you would do? Yes. Am I racist insofar do I have racial animus towards anyone? Then no, I am an anti-racist. But I do have a pride in my culture and my identity, and it's what I want to pass on to my children. It's part of what I want to preserve.
We have to decide culturally if this country is going to have, as a normative American, is it going to be a European Christian who subscribes to Anglo-Protestant culture? And look, the country has always had, the country at the founding had 20% blacks. The country at the peak of its whiteness had 10% non-white. And I still think that would be ethnic national.
It's young white men trying to create an idea of a mystical past identity that they can draw from, because they don't feel like they have a culture or community to call their own, outside of the communities based on hate that they've now formed. And these communities are also built on hurting each other and reaffirming masculinity. Look at something like the Proud Boys, which requires you to beat up each other to gain entry.
Many young white men are never given any other alternative, any other path out. They never are able to even see a way out of this constant cycle of violence and being used and offered another vision of that.
It's funny because I can simultaneously say and believe that the pace at which I came to an understanding of myself was probably the right pace for me. And I've said in the past, I was who I was meant to be at the time, and that who I am now has been built on who I was before. And that the person I am now, even if I had a better understanding, I don't think I'd be the same level of comfort if I was trying to be this 5 or 10 years ago. I can say that and believe it to be true while simultaneously also acknowledging that if I'd had the language and the understanding and the education to just understand now what I didn't understand then about who I could be, who anybody could be, that just were things I didn't even consider, I probably would have been on this path sooner.
I see all of that. I see these men who go through all of this, and it's partially why I think about masculinity a lot. Because I know that path. I walked it for a time. I know the emptiness I was forced to feel. I understand how this system creates angry, violent men like this. How it turns them to wring them of all their money, chasing this thing that they'll never achieve, and then turns them against others. After all, I could have seen how that could have become me, and how lucky I was because I was able to see and envision a path out. A true one, because of who I am specifically, who I am inherently, beyond the male and female socialization. I escaped the Matrix. Or at least, so I thought. Hey everyone. So this is where this part is going to end, but it's not where this video ends. This video is actually part 1 of 2 parts, and honestly, I really think the second part of this video is required for the full message of what I really want to get across with this discussion. If it hasn't already been evident, this video is a really personal one to me, and when I finished it, the whole video came out to be 4 hours long. And as many of you know, if you are part of my regular audience, that is not abnormal for me by any means. But I also realized when I looked at this video as a whole piece that it is a video that I think might be one of my most painful and personal and honestly important videos that I've done. And I also know, given that one of the biggest barriers for new people or people looking at my content to come into it is how long my videos are. Not only just in terms of people seeing a 4-hour video and not really wanting to buy in on that, which is understandable, we only have so much time, but also in terms of the algorithm, which does like long videos in certain cases, but I think there's like an interesting sort of like middle ground around like 1 to 2 hour length that like video essayists can get away with. And so thinking about all of that and my desire to have this whole message be heard, the entirety of the 4-hour discussion, but also sort of wrestling with the realities of YouTube, the algorithm, and, you know, capitalist market forces and all that jazz, I really was wrestling with the choice of whether I wanted to split the video into 2 parts or not, because I really think they need to be working together to be able to have a full picture of what I want to say. And ultimately, I have come to a decision that I hope will allow me to sort of have my cake and eat it too. So what I've decided is that I am going to split this video into 2 parts here on YouTube, with you now having watched the entirety of the first part of this video, and then I'm going to release part 2 of this video next week on Friday. And to a degree that worries me because I really want this catharsis to be there. I really want people to hear the whole message, but I also know that people aren't going to be watching the whole 4-hour video anyways at one point, so hopefully this will be a way for people to buy in, and I'm just going to deeply stress that if you have watched this whole part and feel like it is touching a nerve in you or meaningful to you, please please come back for part 2 next week. And I should say, if you're watching this video after, you know, a week has passed since it came out, part 2 will now be out, and I would just recommend stop watching the rest of this and just go jump in right into that right now. I'll link it up above and down below when it's out. But that having been said, the And Eat It 2 part of the sentiment is that if you want to jump into part 2 right now, and just keep going with the discussion I've had, the full video in its full intended format as one big 4-hour chunk is currently available on Patreon and Nebula. Now, I'm not going to do my whole usual spiel about Patreon and Nebula because the goal of this isn't to sell those, you know, platforms to you, but to express how important this video being seen in full is to me. So just to say it, Patreon is where you can support me paying my bills directly and get your name in videos and things like that. And also I'm, you know, having extra special content there. I'm releasing, you know, the full interviews with Vera, Bellamy, and Lily, who you've been seeing throughout this video on there as well. So you can watch those. So check out Patreon if you want to support me that way and get the full video. But also, if you'd prefer, there's Nebula, which is the streaming service that I and many of my fellow creators are building where we can make content separate from the algorithm and where I can go and release full videos like this one without worry that it'll tank in that algorithm. It's also got things like Nebula classes with some great friends of mine who do really great discussions like Foreign Man into Foreign Lands discussion on how to write personal stories. And Nebula also is a place that's been supporting me and other creators to make really cool original content like Abigail Thorne's Amazing the Prince play or my own upcoming science fiction short film that I'm making that I'm really excited about that I've been announcing some of the cast for that you'll probably see on screen right now called Identities. And I'll put the link below that I've used for other videos that have promoted Nebula that gets you a discount on Nebula if you sign up and also supports me directly and Identities directly as well. But I felt that this was the best way to get this video seen and the message heard while also sort of allowing it to be teed up as best as possible in the YouTube algorithm. And so just to stress, well, certainly I would appreciate you signing up for Patreon and Nebula. Part 2 is coming out in 1 week, and I highly, highly, highly encourage you, and it would mean a lot to me if this video meant a lot to you to continue with part 2. But until then, my friends, I hope you all take care of yourselves. Thank you so much for watching all of this, and until next time, live long and prosper. To all of you patrons who support me doing this, who allow me to be able to be my weirdo dork self on the internet, I would wish to say a very earnest thank you. And an extra special thank you to, as always, here we go! Catherine Lembest, Carrie Ellen False, Joel Herman Holt, Nils Osborne Oldsholm, Miranda Janelle, Lily Gray, Phil, Mary Mello, Ongwe Ias, Heather Long, El Tantivi, Barbie Ann Rounds, Jack McAllen, Stephen Kleinard, Hannah Frederick, Courtney Ray Kelly, Christian Hurst, Jem Shin, Alex Miller, Michael Wolnetz, Chloe Dollar, Randy Thompson, Matt Chung, Nisa Marie, Baba Ruski, Auntie Kate 808, Dark Archon, Samuel Howard, Christine S, Super Desi, William Tony, Spooky Heather Sylvia, Alon Altman, Wellington Marcus, Brits Krieg, Boydie Mary Bethel, Tara Rose, Angela Hendricks, Vincent Ellington, Meadow Whisperer, Jessica Kimball, Lily Blanley, Nicholas Torga, Stephen Coyle, Joel Gilly, Joseph Dewey, Felicia Tost, Garebear 94, Dominic Noble, Zane Schuschler, Marshall Nye, James Krivda, Rose Connolly, Gordon Alexander, Zone 1 Librarian, Winifred Fuss, Weirdy Beardy, I love that name, Nathaniel Fraughton, Sean McKenzie, Jolene Cassidy Ferengito, Transit Toronto, AV, Panico Key, Quattro, Dwayne L, Shield Maiden 4444, Rain Corkin, Damian Rice, Ryan Hunter, Scott Russell, Trusta, W. Randy Edie, John Weatherby, Sage Corbett, Carrie On, Shasha M, Teague Wilson, Melinda Walters, Drew Bach, Stephen Richardson, Autumn Jennings, Jade Persuades, Beatrix Purvis, Matthew Craiglow, James, Maddie H. Lisa, Kevin Froteg, Sean Sullivan, Sean Piper, Epsilon's Greater Than, Melody Ann Winters Good, Flyan Kata, Devon Camerlocker, Casual Observer, Mark H. Williams, Author, Sarah Leslie Hutchkins, The Mighty Jinjojo, Jess Johnson, Flynn, Sarah Bystand, Patricia Cromptick, Sarah Lamoureux, Blueberry Hill, William Stewart, Katie Kate, Jafra Day Thomas, Laura Demereau, Leah Boyd, Roy Nigby, Here Reeses of Eluthane, Michael and Kate Hake, Chris Hurst, Emma Ramirez, Verdox Kai, Skyscanner, Joe Comics, Jordy Lucero, Zofel, Nikki Gordon Bloomfield, Crit Bax, Becky Sparks, Grumpy Dragon 75, Stuart Puptart, Zamula Kincaid, Luna Sophie Celeste, Joanne the Wretch Witch, Valerie Blackbird the Tipsy Changeling, Troy Stull, Blue, Marion Herv, Joe, Jason Knott, Silas Don, Kurt Mulvin, Callum McLeod of Clan McLeod, Adam RDL Taylor, Angie Vinco, Kingy, It's a Bug, Not a Feature, Ulrich Bogdan, and Abigail Marie. Thank you all so much. Again, adore you all, love you all, and thank you for all your support and for making me be able to be a weird dork for all of you. Live long and prosper.